Welcome everybody to the fourth episode of Into the Storybook Brawl podcast. Today we have a guest. I believe we were talking about having a guest on the last podcast, but now we have. I believe we were talking about it being somebody specific, but that didn't exactly pan out. We have Kwee here today. Kwee is a extremely good player, and I'll let him introduce himself. Floor's yours.
Hey, I was originally playing Magic: The Gathering. I went to some GPs. I've gotten a top 16 at a Eternal Weekend in Legacy. And then I broke my hand, so I couldn't play Magic for a while. So I switched to playing Hearthstone Battlegrounds. And at one point, I got into top 7 on the leaderboard. And then I got bored of the game because it has some huge issues. So I moved to
I think we all
Storybook.
can agree there, yeah.
What format Magic did you top 16 in?
Legacy.
And Legacy.
Okay. Oh, you did say Legacy.
He did say.
But I played.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that.
But I played all the different formats, really.
What did you play in Legacy?
Slow depths,
Oh, okay.
making a merit lage that turns slower than normal.
It's good times.
Yeah, just for anybody out there who doesn't have a connection to Magic, Legacy is one of the older formats. It doesn't use all of the oldest cards, but it uses most of them. So it's takes pretty accomplished players to navigate that format. So big props to Kwee, obviously, on that top 16. But it's really cool that we've all essentially come from a Magic background, as far as I understand, or we all have a connection to that game. But throughout everything, we've all managed to end up here, connected to this game now. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yep. Agreed. You started playing Hearthstone, and then how'd you find Storybook? Like just by proxy because it was a similar game, or did you have friends that were playing? Or
I saw it from the paid streams,
gotcha.
the advertising streams. I don't exactly remember who it was, but it was one of them.
So
What was the referral code that we should reference here?
What?
I was just joking. What the referral code was.
Oh. I mean, it's the same way I got into Hearthstone Battlegrounds. I saw, I also can't remember who, but I saw one of the MTG streamers playing Battlegrounds.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. You've written a pretty extensive guide, and I think that's what we're gonna be talking about for the most part. I've skimmed through it and I've read it. Your tier list, your the math and quest math stuff to try to understand it. And there will be a link to this guide for sharing on the podcast video, so y'all can understand exactly what we're going through.
Yeah, it would definitely be a good idea for some of this heavier quest math and some of the general pool math, if you're trying to understand what we're talking about here, to just take a quick peek, because I mean, we'll try to talk at it at a high level, but I think it is good to see some of the numbers and just get a sense of the work that Kwee has put into this guide here. So
yeah, and it is a really impressive guide. So please credit where credit is due here, and definitely would highly recommend checking this out if you're planning on understanding the game at a less fundamental level, more something intrinsic, so you can have more depth versus breadth. But yeah, so let's get into it. So your hero tier lists that I can see here, are these results oriented that have been gathered from other players? Is this something that you have primarily focused upon? How did you come up with this?
Some of the top heroes are mostly from play experience, but they've changed around a bit since I've made this tier list.
Yeah.
Like Merlin, I think I've only played Merlin like 4 times. I'm not really, I don't know, I always feel like there's something more exciting to play than Merlin, so I generally pass it.
That's funny.
I can understand that. Merlin, it's like, I mean, when you low roll with Merlin, it feels real bad.
Yeah.
But when you high roll with Merlin, good luck the rest of the lobby, for sure. But I see a lot for the S tier. At Legend, you have Cruella, Mask, and Skip. So I guess the question that I have is like, so in higher tempo lobbies, I feel like where you have like people like Wonderwaddle, Merlin, Giant, things that could just go for, and Loki, and things that can just kill you. Would you still keep Skip up there at S?
Yeah, I'd still keep Skip up there at S. So with Skip, it's really important which 3-drops you choose. And also, like, going to the 5 gold turn, it's almost sort of better to freeze 3 and 2 so you can spend your 5 gold to buy both. And you spend ones that synergize with a wide range of 4s. So you can, like with Tweedledee, you buy it so you can buy a Princess White, and then you should be stronger than most of these other heroes already.
True. Very true.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it's also interesting just looking at the two guides that Kwee has made. There is a lot of people try to make these tier lists in a complete vacuum and say like, okay, like for this is the best hero and this is the second best hero, and it's like, well, no, like if you actually look at it for like newer players, like there is a tier list here that's like an educated guess, but more based on entry level heroes. And then if you look at it from more of like Kwee's play experience, I would assume like a more advanced type of tier list. And I think it's a really nuanced approach to it. And I really like that because I think in general, tier lists are a little bit flawed. Like it's hard to tier anything. But I think by even choosing to chunk things up like that, I think that's a really wise move.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I like your scaling. For sure. SAVC and then triple F.
There are a lot of bad heroes in this game for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Kwee's a man after your heart, Keith. Do you see where Snow Angel's at?
I seen Snow Angel pretty high. Yeah, I like seeing that. I'm a little sad to see Grandmother so low, but I think if you look in some of the addendum there, just above the guide, like with it being a bit more of a power level meta, it sounds like you would not be opposed to moving Grandmother out of triple F tier, Kwee.
Yeah, so I think this week I've played Grandmother quite a few times.
Yeah.
And I think I've played her like 3 times. I've gotten first like twice and second once.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I like the 10 health is sort of nice because like you use Merlin so you can survive the first 5 turns.
Yeah.
Really, and then but like with Grandmother, you already know that you've survived them just with the 10 health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And I love the idea with Grandmother. Like it really incentivizes power level and like obviously, but there's these decisions where you like get to tier 5 and you're like staring down a level spell. And as a normal hero, you'd be kind of on the fence, like, should I stock up on 5? Should I push 6? And with Grandmother, like if you're almost on 6, you just push that level spell every time, right? Because you're automatically getting that huge stat boost. So I really like that aspect of the hero.
Yeah, that's it allows you to play for a lot more greedy than you would normally play because you have the extra 10 health to play with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's primarily why I see her as like not all the way down there. As for Galahad though, I don't know. I'm a pair gamer that never finds the third. So, it's kind of rough. And I know there are other ways to proc treasures for Galahad, and like that's fine and dandy. But like, I don't know. I see a lot of actually, Kwee, could you talk about your strategy with Galahad since you have him rated a little bit higher?
I mean, so I don't know. You buy the pairs, and then when you triple one, you get it. So after your first triple, you should be fine for like 3 turns to do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
If you like triple on like 6 or 7 gold, you should be fine for like 2 turns, just with the buff alone.
That makes
2
sense.
things. And then you have like, of course, you have the Cinderella, which is just nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing with Galahad is, since you are pair gaming, if you triple like twice and still have this pair, and then you triple the pair is like a 25-25.
That is true because all the stats accumulate, right?
Yeah. The stats accumulate. You get onto the pair you get +4/+2 like twice, and you get +1 or +2/+1 again.
Mm-hmm.
So if that pair is say a polywaggle, it slays by itself.
That is true. And you don't have to pull out a Grimsoul or anything in order to proc it. You could literally just pop it out on 5 potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, which is about the time you would hit a triple polywag anyways.
True.
I mean, is there anything as far as the tier list goes, Kwee? Is there anything else that you would like to highlight, or is there anything else here that you personally? I think tier lists are interesting, but they're ultimately a little bit based on personal preferences and stuff. But is there anything else that you think is worth sort of bringing up before we maybe move on to another section?
So I'm actually surprised that no one brought up where the Pan Shadow is.
Yeah, that is quite high. And I think that's partially why I asked, because you take a cursory look and it's tough to see. I've been trying to play Pan Shadow a bit more, and I have been liking it. So maybe you can talk a bit about Pan Shadow then.
So a lot about Pan Shadow goes into what's in the evil comps tab. I think evil is the strongest comp to play at basically every point in the game. So having a hero that synergizes with the best comp is a good thing. The extra gold is also nice on those first extra turns. You get to buy an extra unit or two, especially for Shrink Ray.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think I definitely am waking up to that idea. Like, I guess both of it. Like the early econ, I always knew was good with Pan Shadow, and I think it's a bit tough for people to adjust to the idea that it's like, well, I only get this bonus once, so it feels a lot worse than it did before. But the amount of econ you can generate early is super strong. And then, like you said, I think I've always liked Evil Comp, but I was kind of falling into the trap of thinking Good Boy was the way to go. But recently, I've been pushing Evil Comp more in the mid game and the late game, and just like really enjoying the benefits that you can get from the early treasures of Evil Comps, and then not needing to find that Good Boy necessarily on 6 to really juice your comp.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of viable alternatives, and I've also been I've been playing Evil for pretty long actually. I don't know. Once I realized like pumpkin and you can make it gold and it spits out a bunch of gold units and you play summoning portal and just what's the other one that when an enemy dies you get attack or whatever?
Oh, what is that? That's tier 5 treasure.
Yeah, that's like actually nuts on in Evil Comp.
Yeah, I believe that's actually in this guide.
Oh, yeah.
Telling you to pick sabers.
Yeah,
sabers is super strong.
Yeah, I really do really do like sabers and Evil Comp for sure. So let's just transition over to it. So in the guide, you talk about how the comp is better than Good Boy, right? And then Hermes boots and mittens and all of that stuff. So like a lot of people are afraid of playing mittens because they're afraid to run into a dork comp and get absolutely smashed by like an angry or something. What would you say to them about that? Other than the dork?
So I would, yeah. So about the angry is, I would point to that second picture in this thing where I have like I have 2 Medusas, 2 apple trees, and like pumpkins, and a 200 attack Doom Breath, and say those don't care at all about angry.
That's very true.
None of those care at all how big the opponent is.
Yeah.
So while before I get to that point, I do sort of care, and that would be kind of annoying, but it's very rare to run up against dwarfs anyways.
Sure. Well,
it's donkey that's more of a nuisance.
Depending on the elo, right? Like, because you're not more high legend, I don't think you see as many dwarfs. But
yeah, the higher you go, the less dwarfs you'll see.
That's true. Yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting that's like a connection. Interesting.
I always kind of view dwarves as like your starter deck, right? Like you go out and it's like a pre-made deck that you get from like the TCG world, and like you can play it really straightforward. It's very linear. Anybody can pick it up and kind of run with it, and it does competent job. But when you go to, let's say, like your locals with it, and you're seeing people that have like all these kind of teched in decks and stuff like that, and there's just no recovery with the deck. There's no responses. That linear play just gets broken up as you start to hit the higher tiers with stuff. So,
yeah. Could we just take a step back for a sec? I think it was good to talk, because I think people like mittens is a really key piece of the way that Kwee has laid out this comp, or it can be a key piece, I guess. But holistically, like why a lot of people would say, okay, good comp is better than evil comp. But what to you about evil comp makes it stronger than good, or why are people generally wrong when they think that good comps are better than evil comps? You know what I mean? Just kind of lay out that argument.
So I think the evil's better is because the good comp requires your good boy to not get touched.
Yeah.
Like you don't want the good boy to get touched by an apple tree. You don't want it to get touched by a Medusa. You don't want it to get touched by a Pigomorph. There's so much things that can happen to the good boy.
Yeah.
And then you just take 20 and die.
Yeah.
Well, if the evil comp, you can win if they Pigomorph anything on your board. Like, sure, that's bad, but it's not like I took 20 damage and died bad.
Exactly.
And then this comp has a good matchup against Good Boy as well. You're fairly likely to win if you have average RNG. So it's good in the lineup, and less reliant on a specific unit.
Yeah.
Like even, and I was asking a leading question in a way, but I did want to hear how people lay that out. But if you even look at the way this comp is set up, right, like the good boy comp, like your most important unit is like sitting right there on the front line, spot 1, like we said, just like completely exposed, right? But then if you look at this evil comp, you're generally going to have your pumpkin in spot 7, right? And quite often it's even going to be Croc. So if you just look at the way that comp is set up, it's like having some mad, rabid dog charging in from spot 1 versus like having this like well-protected queen just like sitting in the back. I don't know. I like that visual. Like it just seems like the evil comp is just better set up to withstand like a lot of hate. So I really think that the pieces as Kwee's laid out and talks about in this guide, like each piece can actually like do different things as opposed to just needing that good boy to survive.
Yeah.
And it seems like you can shift things around too based upon the state of the game and the people that you're facing and the decks that you're going up against. It has a little bit of flexibility in that sense, which is nice.
So those apple trees, they're amazing against good boy, but they're quite terrible against Bearstein.
Yeah.
And in the mirror. I've been experiencing the mirror now a lot more since I've wrote this. Those apple trees.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
And apple tree just becomes anemic for the mirror?
Yeah, because the mirror, so apple tree is bad when the opponent is summoning multiple bodies, because just one body goes into that, the apple tree, another body goes into something else, and you're behind.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just to add a bit more nuance, like I agree that there is the ability to be flexible with this comp, but I mean there is a certain level of flexibility even with good comp. Like we can even get into that later potentially, just in terms of how you set up a good comp, but I think it's really just like the focus is just on like how much better protected your lock piece is, which is your pumpkin in the back. I think that's like super important. And then each piece on its own just doing a lot of work.
My only reservation about like the evil comp, and I've run into it, and like if you have a pumpkin that's like unprotected without Croc, it feels really bad to get blown out by like what's the 2-cost back row spell that hits a back row?
Oh, Lightning Strike?
Yeah, Lightning Strike. Also getting Doom Breath for like multiple targets feels really bad. There is like some form of regeneration, but like I don't know, if your front 2 survive and your pumpkin essentially gets destroyed, like it feels really terrible.
It does. Doesn't that kind of become like a numbers game at that point in terms of like looking at like the probabilities?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doom Breath is a problem for this comp. That is true. So you just got to buy them all first.
Yeah, that's perfectly sound logic. Or you evil twin assault attack and then you're chilling.
Yeah, I have never been able to do that, but I have thought of it.
You have thought of it.
That's actually that's genius. I've never thought about doing. I had a good apple tree today. That felt pretty good, but I haven't done the opposite way.
Feels really nice. That I can only imagine felt incredible.
Yeah, it was.
My least favorite thing was where Beauty's Influence plus Kiss on a pumpkin, and it turned the pumpkin good, and I was like, well, this is useless.
It just makes it worse. It's it's still useful, but it's not as good. Well, I think another thing that if we're gonna kind of like, it's good to talk about the comp in general, but I don't want to gloss over some of the points that Kwee's already made in the guide here. Like, I think Oni King is a really interesting card with this comp because like it can be useful, but it's also like you need to understand like where you're at in the game and like where your comp is to decide whether you're going to pick them up or play them. So just to kind of maybe summarize what you said in the guide already, Kwee, like how would you kind of generally think about Oni King as an evil comp piece?
So Oni King gives you some stats, but some stats doesn't beat Good Boy. It doesn't beat trees either, but it does beat like halfway to Good Boy and halfway to trees.
Yeah,
so it can be okay. It gives you the Oni King gives you 2 pivot points to either this pumpkin comp or to a Jormungand comp in the sleigh that we can get to at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like it's not terrible. Maybe calling it bait is a little too harsh, but it's not something you should stick around with and stick to.
Just to reiterate something we've talked about in previous podcasts when like we wasn't on here, but like when we try to point out these cards, like say Oni King, and even to a greater extent like Shadow Assassin, like calling a card bait quite often means that like it can be wrong, but it could also be right, Like we're just highlighting that like when you look at Oni King, you kind of need to judge like what is the goal with this unit? Like if my goal is to beat an endgame good boy comp, right? Like this Oni King is not going to get there. But if this is my second Oni King so that I can triple into a 6-drop to get my sword from my dragon, well, it's awesome. Or if I'm using this Oni King as tempo so I can greed a bit more, like then the Oni King can be useful, right? So I think it's the thing to highlight here is just like Oni King is something to be wary of, but it ultimately can be a worthwhile card to pick up in the early late game.
Yep. That's kind of how I feel about it too. Like on 6 Oni King, like when everybody hits 6 and say that there was no XP spells in the game, right? And we all hit 6 at the same time. And if there's a Oni King in my shop, I wouldn't pass it. What are you, crazy? Like it's an extra 10 stats. Like especially if I have other monsters like Nyan, like Nyan, or if I have a mummy, or if I have a leftover Grimsoul from being greedy, or anything that is like a monster in general. I mean, you're getting 10 extra stats period from attack. And on top of that, if you hit the Oni King early, especially like if you can hit it like 5 or so, it can 1v9 entire boards. Like I've witnessed it and I've done it and I've had it done to me and it's terrible. But
oh man, the classic golden tier 5 Oni King on the opponent's side, just horrifying. You're just like no way to get through it.
You're just like, how do I kill that? Oh, you don't. Oh, all right. Or Wombat, like Golden Wombat into like Jorm plus Oni King, like somewhere in the back, and you're like, huh, that worked out really well for you, huh? Like, it's stuff like that. But yeah, I really do love the evil comp, and I love how you talked about this. I saw something about Ashwood. Do you normally tech in Ashwood at all? I know if it comes up, it's relevant, right? Because it's a 6-drop evil. But I'm just wondering, like, later in the game with Apple Tree and stuff like that, or do you prefer your Apple Trees not to attack?
Yeah, I would prefer my Apple Trees. Well, if I don't have exploding mittens, I would prefer them to have some attack power.
Mm-hmm.
But the Ashwood is like an early to 6 pickup, and like it works with the pumpkin stuff when the opponent is still like not all the way there, so it's fine. And then you don't choose your level 6 treasure; you get options. So sometimes your options don't have magic stored, so instead it has round table.
And then you just pivot into trees, I guess, right?
I mean, you can also play like with trees. They have some of them are good and some of them are evil. You can play evil trees. You can play good trees. So it's not like your tree lineup can be 2 rotten applewoods and ashwood, and then like
Robin.
Then you still have your upgraded pumpkin and chilling in the back.
Yeah, and that's also what we were talking about before, is like just making the thing that you currently have as your strongest board, and just playing off of that alone, right? Like just trying to survive. So you either can make it to first, or not just going with like the cookie cutter, like, oh, this, like, this is what the comp looks like and this is exactly how you should play it. Is like, no, there are flexible options that should go in there varying on your situation. I really like to hammer that point home.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's a little bit hard. It's like very flashy to be like, okay, this is how to build the perfect pumpkin comp, right? And that's sort of what's laid out in this guide. But at the same time, as we're talking here with Kwee, it's like it's very obvious that when you're building this comp, you want to be considering like, what are my outs here? And as opposed to being excited to jump into a full pumpkin comp, be considering like, what could this become, right? Because the more open you are, the more cards you have available. So as Kwee already laid out, like if you already have that Oni King and you see the out for the Slay comp, you can dive into that. Or if you've got the Oni King and you see like a friendly spirit and you don't have too many evil units, like all of a sudden you could find yourself in a comp that can pivot into good boy. Like it just depends. So I think it's important to remember that the better you get at this game, the more you're going to understand when and how you can afford to pivot. And the more health you have, the more you can afford to be picky in the units you're picking up for this evil comp, which could allow you to ultimately, transition into something that's going to get you that first place if you have the health to buy you that time.
Yep.
And one thing I was going to ask Kwee is like when I think of this guide, right? Like this is the first page that comes to mind for me, just because I think like while I did appreciate the pumpkin comp, I wasn't playing it enough, and reading your guide like really drove home for me. Okay, well, this is a viable strategy. But for you, when you're putting together this guide, like what stands out to you, or what section of the guide do you think would be a good place to highlight next?
I mean, when I created the guide, I created the pumpkin comp first because no one was playing it.
Right.
After that, it was all pretty much an afterthought because I had the other math spreadsheet already created, and so people were already coming here
Yeah.
to put some more stuff out. I could say we can go to Slay next.
Maybe we can go there then. Just okay. I mean, we can talk about Slay, or we can talk about the math. I mean, I think either one is fine to discuss. I mean, from my perspective, when we look at this math stuff, yeah, it's hard to translate this into like a viable podcast format. But I think the quest math specifically applies a lot more to heroes like Pan, I would say. Where else would you say this quest math becomes relevant?
So, like, it's relevant when you're on like 5 gold and you see that Brave Princess,
yeah,
and some other like mediocre 3, and like you pass the Brave Princess because it's not going to proc, and you buy the other 3. But really, if you buy the Brave Princess, you get like a 10% to not see that Brave Princess every roll.
Sure.
Or,
you get a 10% greater chance to see any other 3 that you're looking for, essentially, right?
Yeah, and it's like per roll, it continues on throughout the game, and that's the real text on Brave Princess.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you can slay 3 times, but that doesn't.
And I think just in trying to skillfully transition our way through this conversation and move smoothly through the guide, I think I should just take a step back and kind of just illuminate for the audience what we're talking about, and that's essentially that, like, when you buy a quest character like a Brave Princess, like a Hercules, like a Lancelot, these characters are now removed from your pool. So once you bought that character, that's the only one of those you're going to get, and you will never see it in the shop again, whether or not you sell that unit. So if you are trying to artificially reduce the chances or increase the chances essentially of seeing a specific minion or character, that's a really effective way to do it. And when the opportunity cost is very low, like we said, just picking up a 3 of some kind on 5 gold, it's kind of crazy not to do that,
I actually didn't know that was the case until literally right now.
Yeah, it's not a well illustrated fact, to be honest, and I think it's especially relevant, like I said, on characters like Pan. But it becomes very, when you look at this how this could impact your game moving forward, right? It can be very, very useful.
Yeah.
So how do you decode this? So I'm looking at this sheet here, and we have one column, number of quest characters bought. The next column is level, right?
That's the tier that you're on. So at each tier,
on.
there's a specific percentage to find a character normally, and then, or maybe Kwee can kind of probably illuminate.
So if you look at the playing math first, it more illustrates what's happening here.
Sure.
On the playing thing, you see, so you have like the.
So just to confirm for the audience, sorry, Kwee. So we're moving between the 2 tabs here. There's a quest math tab and a playing math tab. So if we take a step back and look at the general odds of finding any character at any level, is what Kwee is referring to here.
Yeah. Well, we're going to the playing math tab.
Yeah.
So you can see I've calculated I've calculated how many characters. You can see all that there. And then they give you this % chance to find a character to the highest level.
Yeah.
Really, that's any level before you get to 6.
Yeah.
Because they all have the same amount in the pool.
Yeah, exactly. There's 15 of each tier of any character, except for once you get to 6, there's only 10 of each 6. Yeah.
And then you have the % chance to find a character of the highest level, which when you're level 2, you have 100% chance to find a level 2.
Yeah.
And then, like, when you're on level 6, you got a roughly 50% to find a level 6. So
it really doesn't feel that way, huh?
And that's on a per shot basis, correct? That's how.
It's on a per shot per roll basis. That's assuming that like no one has a level 6 yet.
Yeah. So
if the more 6s people have, the lower it gets. But it's lower by like 0.5%, or it's 0.5% for a specific character. I haven't looked at this math.
Right. But the general idea is that it does decrease chances, but it's also, still these numbers are going to hold generally, especially if you're trying to. So then if we take a step back and just look at, for me, like, I love this stuff. And this is the reason that I love this spreadsheet. I love getting into these deep numbers, but not everybody out there is going to want to look at this spreadsheet or is going to want to try to dig into the math and like even understand it. Is there, through doing this math, did you realize some things? Did it change your play, or was it more just like an exercise to just so you would know for yourself?
I mean, I had a rough idea of these numbers, but it was actually to educate someone else because someone else asked for it on the official Discord, so I created it.
Yeah.
What a nice guy.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've my buddy Quinn, who was on the podcast earlier, have put together like a similar type thing, and I just, whenever I'm making a decision, if I think of it and I have time, like I try to look at the odds of like, because you're usually making these decisions with imperfect information, but it's like if you know that you have like a 40% chance to find a specific 3 because you're looking for 2 different 3s, or you have like a 20% chance, or like I used to roll like a lot harder for like Brave Princess on tier 3 when I had tempo, but when you look at the odds of that actually happening, it's so low that it's like, man, like I can't really justify this on average. But then the more 3s that you're looking for, or the more 3s and 2s that you're willing to hit, like that's the kind of stuff that I've started to, by understanding the specific numbers, I've gotten a better sense in general. So I think that's how I would, if I was to try to give somebody a takeaway from this, is that, rolling for one specific character is generally not a good play, but the more outs you give yourself on any specific role, the more worthwhile it can be to actually to take those roles. And that's a lot of how you play a character like Pan is based off of, because you're collecting a lot of 3s in the hopes that you'll triple one of them, right?
Yeah, I thought you meant Pan Shadow at first, and I was very confused.
I always say, I don't know. I should say Peter Pants, because people always get confused. But yeah.
But now that I've joined the conversation, understand where. Yeah, no, I mean you're essentially, when you play Peter Pants, right? You're going for hat ball, or you're going for some kind of strategy that allows you to essentially kiss up your units and have them scale in some kind of meaningful way. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, you're just pretty much looking for 3s the entire time, and this gives you but if you're stuck on level 3 forever, right? Like,
it's like you can. Yeah.
Good.
I even found personally, like the more that I've played a lot of Peter Pants and haven't had a ton of success. I would be curious to hear Quee's thoughts on it. But what I did find is I found that playing Peter Pants and trying to triple those 3s has just given me a lot better sense of like how to get into hat ball and how to play that comp. And I don't go for it as much as some people, but I definitely think that like that was valuable experience. But how do you look at the character Peter Pants, and how do you value hat ball in general, Kwee?
Peter Pants is a hard topic to talk about. He's kind of weird, obviously, but like really the benefit to Peter Pants is that he doesn't level, and the side effect is you get the +1/+1.
And that's not the way a lot of people look at that character, for sure.
Yeah, I see that. I understand what you're saying. I mean, that actually makes a lot more sense when you think of the character holistically, right? Like, you're thinking of, I don't have to level, so I just have to make the best out of these 3-cost treasures that I get. And the side effect is I get +1/+1 for every time I level. So I'm not focusing specifically on leveling and scaling out in an adventure for the most part. I mean, that might be your game plan. I don't know. I don't really play Peter Pan, so I'm guessing there's like various ways to be able to play it, and I'm guessing that is one of them. But I don't know. Adventure can only scale so hard. I think
the adventure of Peter Pants is mostly with Gilded Harp.
Oh, that
because you can get Gilded Harp with Blind Mice triple, and now your adventurers get slayed twice, and there's already triplies in the shop.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense now. I understand. And then you're just pumping out more XP, more numbers, bigger triplies, etc.
Yeah. I haven't really played the XP part of Pants too often, but it is the idea.
Yeah, and that's what makes heroes like Peter Pants, I think, especially complex to play, is because if there is one specific playstyle like Hat Ball that's like generally accepted as being the correct line to take. But depending on the way your early game progresses, you can find these other niche lines. And then you end up in like this weird spot where you're playing a niche hero in a niche line, and you're trying to evaluate on a turn-by-turn basis, like what is this the right line to take? So, and maybe you'll never find out, right? Because you'll never find yourself back in that position again. But like I've played my favorite pants game, which I think I might even brought to Kwee one time, was I played like Gilded Harp early, doing like donkey stuff, and then I managed to kiss into a golden lordy, and then I just went full pivot to dwarfs, right? So that's a pretty odd. Like once you have a golden lordy and you see a golden doubly in your shop or a triply, it's like pretty obvious that like that's the line to take. But I think those kind of situations like really test your fundamental game knowledge, and I think that's what makes Peter Pants especially difficult to evaluate and play as a hero.
My biggest gripe about that hero is actually hand size. I feel like you should get 2 more slots or something. Like it's quite unfair.
Yeah, that is a small issue where you can like no longer buy pairs that you want because you have 4 pairs, or you have like 2 upgrades and like 2 pairs. You're already full.
Yeah, and just like I can't really like clear out my board without making myself significantly weaker. So I mean, I don't think they would ever add something like that. However, I am just saying, like my main gripe with him is hand size. That's about it. Otherwise, I like playing him.
No, he's a fun hero. I find the playstyle really interesting. I haven't found it to be consistent enough with my skill level at the hero to be worth picking up a lot of the time. But you know, if I'm smurfing or if I am not offered anything significantly better, like I don't mind playing the hero. I definitely have some outs.
So we talked a lot about the plane math and quest math, and then the fundamental understanding of transitioning this into comps like Peter Pants and things of that nature. I think this would be a good time of maybe transitioning back into talking about Slay comp. I personally I think it is not exactly the greatest comp to play. I think it's a little bit better now than it was. It absolutely shreds tokens, right? Like that is like a huge thing that it does. And especially with like Fairy Godmother, Baby Bear, things like that, like running around and you just like have a Jerry and Jerry eats the, Baby Bear and goes buck wild. Like you're gonna kill the token comp every time, right?
Yeah.
For the most part.
Like if you look at because if anybody out there is like trying to get a better understanding of Slay and how to play it, and you're looking at the actual guide that Quee's put together here, like I think you would agree that Slay in general is not great, but like there are specific situations where it can be the correct line to take. As you outlined in the first sentence, you're just talking about when you can get that holy trinity of Grimsoul, Baba Yaga, and Jorg together. So how do you think about Slay comp? And is it a comp that you're excited to play, or is it one that you're more just willing to play just because they're the cards given to you?
It's somewhere in between. Obviously, when you have when you have like 3 units on your board that you don't want to get Pigamorphed, you're not in a great spot.
Yeah.
But you're not in a bad spot either. Yeah. Because like if they don't Pigamorph your thing, and if they don't Medusa your thing, you're probably bigger. So you'll probably kill them. So it's like on them to disrupt you, which is a decent spot to be in.
Right.
Well, the interesting thing, and you can correct me if I'm reading this wrong with the guide. I think a lot of people like they see Sad Dracula and they're like, okay, I'm going to play Slay, and the Slay becomes this play that you do that you're building your characters. So if the first, tiers, so finally you get to 6 and you're continuing hopefully with like a big assassin. But this kind of guy is more about that transition to that kind of late game Slay, right? Because you bring up it was all a dream, and how your Slay build is kind of built a little bit around like your the Grim and getting the Jerry to go off, right?
Yeah. So the only Slay I like to play is with Grimsoul, Baba Yaga, and Jormungand.
Right.
It's just because you can get a very large threat, and like if you play with other Slays, then your Jormungand doesn't get big, so everything just falls apart. Like I think Jormungand is only useful with Grimsoul. So and then the only way to get strong with Slay is either you have the Harvest Moon as like Sad Drax, so you have the double attack Medusas and such, or you just have a Grimsoul and a Jorm with the Baba Yaga, and they get into like the 800s of stats. Like they can get really big.
Yeah. You're funneling your stats into a single unit, and like that has its potential upsides and downsides, right? Like you said, like you are overexposed to something like Pigamorph. But at the same time, like if they don't Pigamorph it, like if it is only 3 units, there's still 4 other units on their board, and they have to have the Pigamorph, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, and I think I don't actually hear a lot of people talk about this version of Slay Comp. The only higher level people that I've heard discuss it is like you and Ian Bits. I think like both of you are like big fans of this like Jorg, and I'm sure other people play it too. But I really do not hear it get talked about a lot. So I think it would somebody who's looking to really level up their game, and as discussed, to be looking for those pivot points on six. I think that this is like a really interesting way to look at Slay Comp and a way to just increase your outs on six. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few games where I like play with the Grimsoul Polywoggle. And either the Polywoggle triggers into a Jormungand, then obviously I've tried to play this.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Polywoggle triggers into something else, and then I play Grimsoul with a Lancelot. Then when I get to 6, I actually sell the Lancelot for Jorm.
Right. And how do you play it when you only have that single Jorg? Like, because I find that awkward, right? When you're trying to get that golden Jorg and you're just starting with a single one. Do you like to play both of them on the board? Do you like to hold one in hand? Is it more just situational based on what you can get away with?
I mean, generally you want both Jorms in play, just so you have one less thing that can go wrong.
Sure.
They can Medusa one Jorm and you have the other Jorm.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've held it sometimes when I have good other pieces. When I have other good things to put into play, like 6 power Medusa or Cupid, I can sometimes hold the Jorm.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, that 100% makes sense. Kwee, have you had the pleasure of playing the Evil Eye Baba Yaga book comp with Grimsoul? And
yeah, I've done that as Trophy Hunter before.
It's like
cast like a million spells.
It's literally one of my favorite things. Combat doesn't even have the first combat happens, and then your opponent is dead on board, and they took a billion damage.
Yeah, that is like a potential upside of buying these Baba Yagas and these Grimsouls for Jormungand. Is if you all dream into Trophy Hunter, it's a pretty fluid swap. You already have all the pieces you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's I mean, if whoever's listening out there is trying to understand, like we're kind of discussing that the most basic level is having that golden Yorg off of Poly, right? But the more that you can understand what the pieces of the Slay Comp are, and then if you have those pieces collected and you're, I mean, All a Dream, I think is a generally underrated spell in the community. I think a lot of people, especially after watching the tournament, might be waking up to like how strong that spell is, but understanding how powerful it can be to pivot into a late game hero like a Trophy Hunter and then already have the pieces for it there to go. Like that is not an underrated or not it's a very valuable piece of setting up the Slay Comp this way.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is like it's all a dream, like depending on your posture, right? You can hit like I don't want to go too deep in this, but like you can hit Morgan, you could hit Muerte if you have Good Boy, you could hit Trophy Hunter with Good Boy, and if you have Magic Sword, like watch all the numbers. Just it's insane.
The Morte is all about the Grimsoul, not the Good Boy.
All right, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's fair enough. But what I'm saying is just like that card is actually nuts for a majority of it. And sometimes you can get Gwen if you survive the extra turn, you're playing against somebody that's dead or something. You can Knighthood for free, even though it casts your spell or whatever. But like it's so good. And there's so many times where like I've gotten into Grandma like in late game to give myself that 10 extra HP so I go ahead and get that triple and then turn the game around. So that's like my piece on it. Was all a dream, and you should buy that spell more if you're not.
Yeah.
Especially late game. Unless you're on something that is essentially going to break your board state. Like if you are playing Last Breath Good Boy, for example, do not It's All of a Dream out with all of your Trophy Hunter. You're going to grief yourself.
Yeah.
I've done that.
I think it's generally going to be obvious to you when it's incorrect to cast All as a Dream, but I think if you look at that spell, you better have a really justifiable reason why you're not taking it if you are going to pass on it, because there's just so many good late game options that you can use.
And there are so many heroes that suffer really through excel in the early and mid game that are not good in the late game, like Wonder Waddle, for example. I mean, like, yeah, you can still get boots, you can get golden polys to trigger off, you can, but like if I have the option to get out of Waddle into something else, I'm going to take it 9 times out of 10. Like, especially when I hit the late game. So I don't know. It's just like evaluating your current, and also, is it worth for me to play that spell? Is that going to change the outcome of my current game?
Yeah.
But yeah.
One thing I think about quite often from a design standpoint is I wonder. I'm curious if they designed this game with All Is a Dream in mind in a way, right? If they did put heroes in there that they're generally not expecting people to play, but that actually can, have an outsized impact when you cast All Is a Dream. Like, does anybody have any thoughts on that from a design perspective?
I think so. I think Zelhua wasn't actually supposed to be like a base hero that was going to be very good. I think it was just primarily meant for something you to play on sixth. It was all a dream into.
Right.
Same thing with Morgan.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, because I know you think about that stuff sometimes. 40. Like, do you have any thoughts on like, is that a good thing for had to have it designed that way? What do you think about that?
You mean regarding? Just rephrase that for me, really fast.
Yeah, no. I'm just curious, like, because to me it feels weird that there's certain heroes that like you really don't want to play that kind of just exist to be dreamed into. Like, use that spell to transform yourself from Merlin into Morte or to Mordred or whatever.
See, I kind of like picking Zelhua as a beginning hero. I mean, I know that it doesn't give you, the immediate benefit that a lot of the other characters do.
Sure.
And so, like, my trade-off in thinking is that a lot of the buffs I'm giving to my early game characters are characters I'm going to replace anyways.
Sure.
So that buff is kind of short-lived, but it gets you to a mid-game state with a certain amount of life points. Do I mind sacrificing some life points then to achieve a better mid-game state? That's why I've been playing a lot of Zelhua since it's kind of been modified, and I've been pretty successful with it. So, like,
Well,
I mean,
awesome. I love to hear that.
I know he's watched a couple of of the duels I do. I'm sorry, that Bahamut does, and I'm sure he's having like a heart attack looking at my low life points. And he's like, oh my God, like, but I think in a game where your mid to late game and then definitely your late game can turn everything around, can my mid game generate enough advantage for the early game sacrifice that I make? I think some heroes it's worthwhile for. And again, probably this all plays into like how people play the game, So it's tough.
No, I think that's a really good way because I'm that's sort of why I asked the question, right? Because I'm looking at this from a very myopic standpoint, being like, well, there's certain heroes I would never play because the EV of the percentage ratio of the whatever, and you're like, dude, like Zahua's sweet and I do pretty well with it. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
So it's like how are you going to approach this game and how do you actually want to enjoy it? And I think that's a really good way to give me a bit of reality check on that one.
And maybe it is because I don't mind playing a little vanilla early on either.
Yeah.
I don't mind relying upon me being able to shift back and forth through whatever the best choices are early on and not rely upon, like an early treasure advantage or an early hero advantage.
Yeah.
But I'm also not the most highly ranked person. So, and would I do that in a tournament setting? Probably not, so.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. I think I truly meant it when I said I think it's really nice on this podcast how we can have a wide variety of perspectives on the game, and how we can all kind of try to bring in some flavor as in terms of what we enjoy about it, and then allow the audience to kind of connect with that.
Yep. So we're running a little bit short on time, just a tiny bit, but I wanted to go ahead and wrap up. Kwee, do you have any like final thoughts about highlights of the guide that you think that most people should be referring to, other than all of it, because you put a lot of hard work into it? Actually, let me rephrase this. For newer players, for the intermediate and for the more advanced, what parts of the guides would you highlight for each section if you could?
I didn't really build the guide with the intermediate player in mind.
Okay.
But I guess it would mostly just be the evil comp because that's where I put in the most effort because that's really what I wanted to explain to people, so I would start losing to Pumpkin instead of beating it.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's very in depth. It's very good, and I think one thing we didn't get into as much on here, but I think is worth talking about is not worth reading for the viewer out there is this early mid game stuff near the end because might be more obvious, might be less obvious how to play that, but that early mid game is very, very strong. And if you can transition that into an actual strong late game comp, you're kind of doing it all. And that's what Kwee said at the start is that this evil comp can kind of be the strongest comp at every point of the game if you build it correctly.
Correct. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, there are some variations. Like if people, I guess like it's kind of hard though, because like especially if you're playing a Vela, right? You're gonna get sniped by dragons and like all this other stuff that for like the early like Black Cats and Queen of Hearts and stuff like that. Like you're going to be punished, and that's normally where I end up playing Evil Comp the most in my experience was like going from a Vela into straight up Evil from finding like books or mummies or something versus like playing just like all of the little token creatures and going into Bearstein because like I don't really hold Bearstein that high in regard for endgame. I think it's a really good at 6 unit. That's a discussion for another day, but I primarily like went into Pumpkin if I could find one early or like Evil in general, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, your mileage may vary with this evil mid game stuff, but especially these newer intermediate players, if you're not finding yourself playing evil in the mid game, give this a try. See how it works for you. Maybe the meta has shifted and the dragons are too prevalent, but I think regardless, it's worth reading this stuff and giving it a try because I know for myself, this guide has really leveled up my game and really made me fall in love with Pumpkin again. And I'm very appreciative to Kwee for doing that for me.
Yeah, I love Pumpkin too, so thanks, Kwee. Also, heck you in some regard because I really hate playing it when I get offered a golden good boy and have to deal with 4 Medusas and apple trees and a pumpkin. So love you, but also heck you at the same time.
There you go.
But have you experienced the grace of the pumpkin mirror?
Yeah, I have. And I also experienced a pumpkin mirror with mirror, and that was the most degenerate thing I think I've ever done in my entire life. Is just play pumpkin with mirror, and the board went crazy, and we both had double sarcophagus. Or we had Mimic and Sarcophagus. I had Mimic, Sarcophagus, and Mirror, and I just like machine gunned out the entire board. His Sarcophagus was going off. It was just a flurry of purple everywhere. So yeah, good times though. Good times. So yeah, any shout outs? Anything you want to give as your last final thoughts, Kwee?
Well, I would like to shout out the first page where it says I'm open to coaching people.
Oh,
hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Is that some free coaching or is there some premium behind that?
It's premium.
Yeah. Is it freemium or is it premium?
Directly relatable to the value that you get from his excellent coaching.
Okay, cool.
Well, on this front page, it's very honest. I think we're all trying to figure out how we can add value and how we can get back value in this game. So I think if you're open for some coaching, I think shout out to Kwee and I think both parties could definitely figure out something that would satisfy both sides. And I think based on the discussion here, it'd be well worth your time to spend a couple bucks to help out Kwee. So I think if you are interested, I don't think price is going to be a barrier, but I do think it'd be worthwhile for you to do so and discuss. And they put their Discord details here on the front page.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and post that at the bottom of the comment section as well. Last thing, I just really want to touch on the coaching thing because I think it's so important. If you are a good player, you will always have better insight from somebody that is going to either share a different opinion about how you could have done something, and just getting more perspective in general in coaching is extremely valuable and important. It doesn't matter what level of the game. The NBA stars still have coaches, right? They might be the best and they might be athletic and they have the greatest basketball minds, but like in the same regard, they can't see what's exactly going in front of them. And I think that coaching is a wonderful way for you to get that kind of insight, right? So I would highly recommend looking into coaching, especially if you want to bring it to the next level. If you want to go for those, top 16 placements on ladder. And I think Kwee is definitely a valuable resource for that. So big shout out to him.
An interesting thing for people that have never like paid a coach or worked with a coach before too is you could spend an enormous amount of time in a game. I know that I've done it with some games where I've just spent hours upon hours upon hours, but I've been playing the same hour over and over again and not really advancing or learning things. You know what I mean? I've been like 40 hours deep into something, and then one person comes around, shows me some stuff, and I'm like, wow, you just literally could have saved me 38 hours, worth of time. And so that time equates to some kind of value. So I would never undersell the insight of a really good coach.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
100%.
Well, that's awesome.
All right. Any closing thoughts from anybody?
No, thanks for continuing to host this thing, Bahamut. It's a pleasure to be part of the podcast and having 40 around. It's always a good time with you all.
Yeah.
Stay brawling.
Thank you very much, Kwee, for showing up on such last minute notice. I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk about your guide. You're doing great things for the community, and I hope you continue to do so.
Yeah, it was also my pleasure to be here. So thanks for inviting me. Had lots of fun.
Hopefully be back soon.
Yeah, I hope to be back soon. I'll come every time I'm invited.
Cheers.
We're going to hold you to that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So with that, like, follow, subscribe. Please don't buy egg. All right. Love you all. Bye.